we've been talking about for the last couple of hours. Winder, Georgia, they're the scene of the latest school shooting. And again, when you look at the statistics, Rick, unfortunately, whether they are reported or not, this is something that happens almost virtually every single day in our country, whether it's multiple victims or a single victim. And we've done a number of stories about weapons at schools. And so many schools across the metro are trying to do what they can to make sure that those weapons do not make it onto campus, that they don't make it into the classroom. It wasn't that long ago that we had a shootout at a Metro Atlanta school in the parking lot where multiple agencies were called and the school was put on lockdown because there was this shooting in the parking lot of the school with students nearby. So unfortunately, this has become a way of life for us. We hate that it is that way. We are trying to do the best we can with the tools that we have and hopefully at some point be able to change that so our students feel like they are safe going to school, that learning in the classroom is a safe haven for them. Once they leave the safety of their home, they go to another safe space.
You know, we've done so many reports, including one this morning, about safety measures that are being put in place in schools. We talked to the superintendent of Cobb County Schools, Chris Ragsdale, who talked to us about some of the safety precautions that are new this year. And he also said that there are other safety measures that have taken place and put in place that he did not want to talk about publicly. So there are things that are visible to the public, visible to students when they walk in the door, visible to parents when they go to pick up their children, and then there are things that are not seen, different things that schools are trying to do, but it seems like whatever they try, it's not enough. It doesn't solve the problem, as we've seen today at Appalachian High School in Winder. This is video from earlier today of cars leaving the scene, law enforcement vehicles speeding away from the scene. But right now we know that the main thing is going to be getting these students reunited with their parents and getting them home. This is just sort of practical information for folks who are in the Barrow County School District. They want parents to know, and we can share this information with you again, that schools will begin to transition from hard lockdowns to soft lockdowns. And I'm not sure, I admit, to know exactly what the difference is. We can work in getting those details. And we will work to release students on time as this transition from hard to soft lockdown occurs. Buses will run as close to normal schedule as possible. So we're at 2:33 on a Wednesday afternoon. And if you are in Barrow County and your child takes the school bus, this statement says that you should expect your child's school bus to arrive back home as close to its normal arrival time as possible. That's the goal. That's what they're trying to do. And the statement from the police says that if you are a parent who want to go and pick your children up in person, to be patient. The traffic will be heavy. And most importantly, do not block roadways, sidewalks, bus and car lanes at school sites, because emergency vehicles are still needing to get in and out at various schools, especially at Appalachian High School. So that's the information for parents of students in Barrow County schools. And
Rick, we're getting some new information from a local lawmaker, Representative Mike Collins. This Appalachian High School, rather, is in his district. He says, this again from Representative Mike Collins, very sad to confirm there have been 4 fatalities from the shooting at Appalachian High School in Winder. Many others wounded, but not all gun-related or life-threatening injuries, some from efforts to flee danger. The suspect in custody. Again, Representative Mike Collins confirming some of the information we've already gotten from the GBI and from the Barrow County Sheriff's Office as well. But certainly for lawmakers in those districts who represent areas where Appalachian High School is, they have a vested interest in this. And certainly those parents will be going to them saying, what can you do? Right. How can you help? How can you make this school, our community, safer? So no doubt, local congressmen, lawmakers across the state will be taking a close look at this shooting today, mass shooting today, and trying to figure out how can they make this better for our children.
You know, we've talked, obviously with an election coming up in November, so much polling has been done where people have been asked about the issues that are most important to them. And time and again, we hear voters respond with things like immigration and the border, with the economy, and also this year, reproductive rights among the top issues on the minds of voters as we head towards November 5th. You know, and that is in spite of the fact there no mention of gun safety or gun violence, in spite of the fact that we have had so many school shootings. It's almost as though we've become numb to them. We hear them in the news. As a news anchor, Tracy and I, you know, we report them on what seems like an all too regular basis, and then we move on with our lives and we go on to the next thing. But now we have a community in our own backyard in Winder where that is not going to be possible for the folks here to turn the page and go on with their lives. Instead of hearing about a school shooting in some, you know, different state, different part of the country, now they're dealing with a school shooting in their own backyard. And you have to wonder if this will play a role in the upcoming election, whether it is now going to be an issue that voters in Georgia and elsewhere are keeping top of mind as they decide whom to vote for November 5th.
Yeah, and is it one of those things, like you mentioned, Rick, where, you know, now it just happened. So yes, that is top of mind. But once we get closer to the election, the farther away we get from this, unless it happens again. Unfortunately, it just might. You know, and I think when you look at a community like Winder, I've been to Winder a few times. It's about 40 minutes northeast of Atlanta. It's a quiet community. You know, you could say one of those communities you move to because you want to get out of the city and away from the hustle and bustle and all those things related to the city. But when you have a school shooting in a community like Winder, where the elementary school is nearby, which happens in a lot of those rural communities, you know, the bus makes it a lot easier for everyone, right? Going to school or for parents to pick up and the buses to manage their way around. But when you have a school shooting in a community that is as tight-knit and as small and as rural as Winder, it can happen anywhere. And we've seen that time and time again, where there is no corner of the country safe. There is no corner of the state that is safe. And I know a lot of people in that community and across the metro are probably saying that to themselves tonight. Again, what can we do instead of just sitting back and watching? And to your point, Rick, this is an election year. I mean, we have the power. We talk often about being able to change at a local level. You know, it's not just the president that we need to be concerned about voting in that election.
Every member of the House of Representatives is up for re-election on November 5th as well, including Congressman Collins, whose statement you just read. All right, we're taking a look. Where are we going?
Let's head to Adam Murphy. He's on the ground there, speaking with some parents there. Adam, just what a day. But are a lot of those students being able to make it to their parents and hopefully make it home?
Tracy, they are. In fact, over the last hour or so, we've seen many students reunite with their parents, walk away safely, many of them counting their blessings. I had one mother saying, "I'm just so grateful today that my child's okay," but others can't say the same. And that was a real, moving comment that I received from one of the parents. And you're looking live now out in front of Appalachia High School here in Winder and Barrow County. We did hear from Sheriff Judd Smith also about an hour ago. We didn't get a lot of information. We've learned more information, obviously, from the GBI since, about 4 people being dead and 9 injured. But the sheriff talked about this being a very evil thing. And he said the call came in just after 9:30 this morning. And I did have the opportunity to speak with some students that even had some cell phone footage that they have just shared with me, and we're working on turning that around for our viewers and for all of you at home right now. But when I looked at some of the footage, it was footage of law enforcement officers rushing into the school building, rushing through the hallways, armed with guns, going into classrooms to make sure students were accounted for and that they were safe. There was also one clip that I saw in a hallway where there was what appeared to be a rifle that looked like evidence of some sort that was lying in the hallway. We don't know, of course, whether that was the murder weapon that could have been used by the shooter. We don't know. But what I will say is we have seen some of the footage from inside when there were very terrifying moments going on with the students, faculty, and staff. Very emotional day for everybody out here, including myself. I mean, I'm a parent. If you're a parent, you have children, you have grandchildren. I mean, you know how traumatic something like this is. I mean, you see it and you hear about it, and then you always hear people say, well, I didn't ever expect this to happen in my community. And like you talked about, Winder is a very quaint community not far from Athens, Georgia, in Barrow County, and very calm and peaceful place. A lot of people that live in these areas think that they feel like they're away from all the crime, but you know, anything can happen anywhere, and it's just been a very emotional day for a lot of people. And so we're trying to come to terms with exactly what happened, how this happened. I think I may have mentioned earlier, and I'll say it again, I've had some students relay information to me telling me there are no metal detectors here at this school, or perhaps at any of the schools in Barrow County. So one would wonder if that might change. So that is kind of what we know at this point in time. Sheriff Smith did say that he is hoping to gather more details, work through this. It's a very fluid situation, and as soon as they can get more information and confirm exactly what happened, they will provide at least some new details to us come 4 o'clock this afternoon, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we are going to stay out here and continue to monitor the situation. A lot of kids going home safe tonight with their parents, thankfully, but not everyone. And many are receiving medical attention at this hour. So I know there are a lot of thoughts and prayers that have been put out by many parents, those leaving with their children, praying for the others. So we will continue to stay on top of developments and bring you the very latest as we gather new information from right outside Appalachia High School in Winder. Guys.
Thanks very much, Adam. You know, I mean, just from, again, a logistical question here has to do with school at Appalachia High School. The rest of the week, it seems fairly obvious that the rest of the week will be disrupted in some way. You know, I know from having covered, and you do too, that these schools that are crime scenes are basically sealed off, sometimes for weeks and weeks, as forensics teams move in and investigate and try to account for every single bullet that was shot, anything that that might help them in their investigation. And that is meticulous work that they take their time, obviously, so that they do it correctly. And so it very well may be that Appalachia High School is not open and available to kids, or at least a portion of it, for some time to come. Again, we don't know that. Just thinking about this as we talk about kids getting home from school today, a lot of parents might be thinking about kids going to school tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. We just got a new update from Winder Police. The city of Winder will open Jug Tavern Park to the community tonight at 7 p.m. so that people can come together and grieve for the horrific events that unfolded today in Barrow County. So again, an event already planned for tonight at 7 p.m. at Jug Tavern Park. So if you live in the Winder community in Barrow County and you'd like to show your support, that is happening tonight at 7 p.m. No doubt a candlelight vigil will be held, an opportunity again to comfort those people who've been through this traumatic loss, who've been through this traumatic day there at the school. And, you know, Rick, as you mentioned, it's hard to tell. We will bring that information to you when we have it, but how soon students would be able to go back to that school. It's going to be traumatic for them. Yeah. And certainly there are a lot of resources that are available to them and their parents to be able to handle this, cope with this as best they can, talk this through. There's a lot of things that honestly in life we were not prepared to cope with.
No.
And this would be one of them, that you go to school one day expecting to learn something, and this is how it ends up.
We've talked about how this is becoming all too frequent occurrence in our country, school shootings. We wanted to put that in perspective for you, give you some of the facts and details on this. Our colleague Andy Parati's been looking into that. Andy, what have you learned?
Hey, Rick, Tracy, as you, probably many of you, as you're watching the images unfold, you're wondering, man, this seems like it's happening a lot more than it usually has over the past couple of decades. Well, here's the actual numbers that we've been able to identify nationwide and specifically here in Georgia. According to the Gun Violence Archive website, which mostly reports and collects data from media reports, so far in 2024 alone, 575 gun incidents so far this year nationally. Broken down, here are the numbers actually in Georgia: 34 incidents, 97 incidents, 5 fatalities, 17 injuries, 72 arrests. These again are numbers from the Gun Violence Archive, and the date ranges are from 2022 to 2024. Nationally, if we can go back to the graphic just to give you some more perspective of how often this is happening. And so far this year, nationwide, 575 gun incidents at schools nationwide, which includes a combination of shootings, arrests, injuries, deaths, the number of times suspects have been arrested, the number of times suspects have been killed during active shooter incidents at schools. Just some of the, to provide some perspective of how often we're seeing this. Another thing that sort of caught me when I was looking at all of the massive sort of response from law enforcement and the huge security perimeter. We've mentioned this multiple times, but there are so many schools located within a short distance from this high school. We're talking about a middle school, an elementary school, and a preschool, all within a very small distance from each other. So that may explain why, one of the reasons why we're seeing such a huge law enforcement presence, and often why we can't get close to the school maybe as we previously had covering these types of incidents. But another thing that we're sort of looking into and is the active shooter drills that are happening across Georgia. Last year, state lawmakers passed a law requiring schools to conduct active shootings. They have to do it at least once a year. It's got to be done by October 1st. Part of that law requires schools to report the completion of the drills to the Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency. Those schools also must create a school safety plan that the teachers, the administrators, law enforcement, students must be aware about. And also the creation of a state-approved school safety anti-gang program where teachers are trained to identify potential gang activity. So again, as you guys were mentioning, it certainly seems like we're seeing a lot more of these. The actual numbers show that we're seeing a lot more of these. 575 gun incidents at schools nationwide. Of those 575, so far this year, 34 of those happening in Georgia, at least 2 of those involving fatalities, 8 injuries, and 28 arrests. Of course, those numbers are now going to increase with today's incident. Since 2022 to present, 97 gun-related incidents at Georgia schools, guys.
Thanks very much, Andy Parati, giving us some context on this. And it is just jarring to hear those numbers as Andy was reading them to us, just to know that this is such a common occurrence now.
Pervasive throughout.
Yes, I used the word epidemic earlier. I think that's probably a good way to describe it. We just have an epidemic of this. And what is the answer? And this is a scene right there in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Looked like one of the victims who was of today's shooting that the camera then panned away from. But just absolutely horrific images splashed across our television sets today. And we're just having to watch this on television. Imagine what it's like to be living through this, and then to be living through the days and weeks to come. Because of course we do know of the trauma that people suffer from as a result of having been a part of these kinds of situations. And it's not trauma, as you said, Tracy, that we're equipped to deal with. It's not trauma that goes away overnight. This is something that the community of Winder and, of course, Appalachia High School specifically, the folks there are going to be dealing with for a long time to come as they try to come to grips with the tragedy that has unfolded on their campus today.
And we've just learned from one of our reporters there near the high school that the middle school nearby, those students are being released and they can now go home. The information we got from Winder Police a little bit earlier this afternoon was that the school would transition from a hard lockdown to a soft lockdown, and they'd work to release students on time. Of course, the school day ending close to about now. We're almost at 3 o'clock. Some of those students already been released. And we do want to head out to our Yasmina Alston, who's there by Appalachia High School right now. Yasmina, what more have you learned? I know you just told us, informed us that the middle school students, they are able to hopefully meet up with their parents and go home.
Tracy, that's right. We do know the middle school is doing their release of students right now. We've watched as several parents have waited for this moment because the school was also on lockdown. But now if you look behind me, you can see that police are allowing cars to come out of the parking lot of the middle school and letting those students come home. We have just been seeing so many families, so many parents, so many students walking this way, going back to their cars after getting their students, after getting their loved ones. And we actually had the chance to do an interview with a 14-year-old student at the high school who says that he watched as someone with a gun walked into his classroom and started shooting. This 14-year-old says that he saw some of his classmates on the ground after being shot. We ran into this student with his family. He was with his parents and also two of his sisters who go to the middle school, and he wanted to share what he experienced. He was obviously very traumatized. It was a difficult interview because I don't think he even still could believe what he had witnessed. This 14-year-old says that, you know, in those moments, the classroom filled with smoke. He says his ears are still ringing from hearing those gunshots. He watched his teacher jump into action after the gunshots were fired. He says, you know, once the person with the gun was out of the classroom, his teacher immediately closed the door, put bookshelves and desks in front of the door to make sure that no one else could come in. This 14-year-old says that he called his dad and his mom while he was in the classroom, and his dad was there during the interview as well. And his dad says that all he could hear is commotion in the background. He had no idea what was happening, but he knew that something was going on just from what he heard in the background. And of course, from the fear in his son's voice. We also, you know, had the chance to speak with the parents who say they, of course, can't believe this happened and want to see some sort of changes now. And I do want to let you hear from the 14-year-old student that we were able to talk to as he describes those moments in his classroom.
I'm just doing my work in class, and something just told me to look to my left because, like, I'm sitting, like, by the door. Like, I'm sitting like this, and the door is like this. So something just told me to look to my left. I look to my left. I see a kid with he had, like, a big gun. It was like an AR. With the, he got his head sticking out the door with the gun, and then he just started. Then I got up, I started running. He started shooting like 10 times. He shot at least 10 times, and then I ran to the back of the classroom. I dived behind the desk, and my teacher had got in front of me, like he was guarding. But like the gunshots were so close to me, like my ears started ringing real bad. Like the whole classroom was smoking.
Very, very traumatizing for that student and the others in that classroom as well. His parents, you know, saying they cannot believe this happened. And again, they're saying they now want to see changes. They want to know, you know, what changes are going to be made as far as security at the school. They want to see metal detectors and more security. So a really, really traumatizing event for these students and the teachers and everyone who was in the school, and of course the families and the community as well. Back to you guys.
Yasmina, just listening to that young man, I'm so sorry for what he had to go through today. When he was describing the shooter, he used the word kid. I heard him say kid. Did you get any more information from him? Any more of a description of the shooter?
So I asked him, you know, if he recognized the person with the gun, and he said no, he had never seen this person, but he also said that this person had on a mask of some sort, so it wasn't possible to see this person's entire face. But, you know, he says he didn't recognize this person from what he could see. We did make sure to ask that, but he also said that everything was so chaotic in those moments, it was really hard for him to pay attention to who this person was. He was more so just concerned about getting to safety and making sure that his classmates and teacher were okay too.
Wow. All right, Yasmina, thank you very much for that. Want to check in with Chelsea Beimfohr, who's also on the scene and has been for a long time. Chelsea, I wonder what you can share with us.
Well, our producer was just commenting that there's a lot of cars. This is Tom Miller Road, about half a mile from the high school. It's been mostly closed today. Parents have been having to park up the street and then walk about a mile to pick up their children from the high school or the middle school. You can see there's still some families making their way back to their cars here. We know that they've been reunited at the football field and that the middle school students have now been let out of school as well. So that's what we're seeing on this street here. But as these families have been walking by us, we've stopped and spoken with some of them. We spoke with a freshman named Adriana and her father. Her father also went to Appalachia High School, so this has been an incredibly emotional day for them on so many levels. She's a freshman. She tells us she was in the classroom this morning and she said they started hearing bangs and she thought that they were bathroom stalls across the hall slamming. But she said when they continued, they realized it was gunshots, and she said everybody dove to the ground, got in the corner. And I said, were you able to contact your parents and let them know what was going on? She said her cell phone in that particular classroom, I'm not sure what the campus policy or the district policy is, but she says all of their cell phones were in like a bin up at the front of the classroom. So she said, I was not able to contact my father. She said they were inside sheltering in place for about 30 minutes. Eventually, a SWAT team came and cleared her classroom and escorted them out to that football field. She says she was out there for about 2 hours, was able to get a cell phone from another classmate and make contact with her family. They were able to come and pick her up, and her father was just saying how relieved he was to be able to finally see his daughter and give her another hug. Guys, back to you.
Oh, Chelsea, absolutely. It has been certainly a difficult day here across the metro. I want to introduce my colleague, Carly Barnett, joining us for the next several hours as we continue to cover the school shooting at Appalachia High School in Barrow County. 4 people dead. Our coverage continues on Atlanta News First.
Atlanta News First starts now with breaking news.
We continue to follow breaking news here on Atlanta News First. I'm Tracy Hutchins.
And I'm Carly Barnett. And Tracy, I'm just joining you. I know you've been on the air now for several hours following this closely. I, too, have been following this very closely. We are covering this from all angles. We have multiple reporters, anchors on the ground right now getting those details, as well as our digital team and a lot of behind the scenes going on to verify all of the facts and bring you the most up-to-date information.
We do want to get to our colleague, Blair Miller, who is covering this story as well from the field. Blair, 4 dead, 9 in the hospital, a suspect right now alive and in custody. Certainly a tragic day across the metro and certainly there in Barrow County.
Yeah, absolutely, Tracy and Carly. It's heartbreaking to say the least. I just arrived here in the last 10 minutes driving up to the scene right outside the high school here, and it's important to point out that you have the high school, the middle school, there's even a preschool, all within this area surrounded by a couple of different neighborhoods. And driving in here, I kept seeing parents either arriving or bringing their kids back. Either they were high school students, middle school students, or some of those preschool kids. And the mood out here, so many people with questions, but it's obviously a very emotional time for this community. This high school has about 1,800 students here. And some of those students, you know, I was just looking back behind us, the stadium's off on the other side of the school, and you can still see some students out there ready to be reunified with their parents as some of those parents start to show up here. I've been to school shootings at Virginia Tech, Uvalde, sadly, And now here, and they all have that same sense of people just in disbelief as to what has happened out there, and what has happened here has happened in our own community. Carly, Tracy.
All right, Blair, we continue to follow this story, and once again, to recap for you, the GBI confirms this for us: 4 dead, multiple people hurt, 9 taken to the hospital. Again, that suspect alive and in custody. One single suspect as we continue to watch this situation unfold. These are live images from our First Alert chopper right now. You could still see a number of law enforcement officers in the parking lot. We'll show you some live images shortly. These images are from earlier in the day. This all unfolding just after 9:30 this morning, not long after those students at Apalachee High School really started their school day, and they encountered this. We have a number of reporters in the field there speaking with some students along with their parents, recounting what they heard, what they saw. And in some cases, Carly, some of those students heard the gunshots right next door. That's what they tell our reporters. And in one, Yasmina Alston, one of those students alongside his parent, telling us that he saw a person with a gun basically poke their head into his classroom and start shooting. And this young man had to run for cover, and said that he saw a number of his classmates on the ground there. And it's just horrific to think that these students will have to deal with this after today. The story goes on for them. It doesn't just end with this today.
Right, and that's the unfortunate thing, is the images that these students have had to see are unfortunately going to stay with them. We hear from that student now, only 14 years old.
I don't know, I was in class and we heard shots. The teacher ran, slammed the door, made us all go in the corner. We heard like the teachers and everything in the hallways, the police. We heard like the shooting, and then we heard that they ran away. And then after a while, they came and took us out to the football field.
And y'all have been out there since?
Yeah, we've been out there for like 3 hours.
What went through your mind waiting out there, not knowing what was going on?
I was like a little scared. I was trying to make sure all my friends were okay because I heard like they got shot. But I mean,
we just learned from the sheriff's office that 2 people died in this and that several others were injured. When you heard that, what went through your mind?
It was sad because I know I go to school here. That could have been one of my friends I don't know of and stuff. It sucked really bad.
And Tracy, of course, we are learning this information in real time. Of course, that soundbite was from earlier this afternoon. We have now confirmed, unfortunately, those fatalities have increased. We know that 4 people have died as a result of this shooting incident. And I know that Blair spoke about in his reporting that there's the high school, there's the middle school, even a preschool, all within close proximity to each other. And this is a tight-knit community. I think it was about 20,000 people I saw in Winder, Georgia. And there are only two public high schools in Barrow County. So this just goes to show you how many students in that community went to one of 2 of these schools and how many lives were impacted as a result of this.
Yeah, and that will continue. I want to give you an update. I'll get to that update from Marietta City Schools in just a moment. Right now, we do want to go out to our reporter, Yasmina Alston, who's been speaking with a number of students and their parents out there. Yasmina, that account, that young man that you spoke to earlier, who witnessed the shooter opening fire in the classroom, according to him, is just traumatic.
Tracy, it is, and a very difficult interview to do. You could just see on his face how devastated he was by what he says he witnessed. And he also told me, he said, this just continues to replay in his mind over and over again. He's only 14 years old. He says he was in class when he saw a person with a gun poke his head into the classroom. And the next thing you know, he started to hear gunshots. And those moments, of course, pure chaos and panic for not only this student, but all of the students in that classroom and also the teacher in that classroom. This 14-year-old student says that he saw some of his students some of his classmates, laying on the ground after this happened. He describes hearing the gunshots and the ringing in his ears and seeing smoke in the classroom after those gunshots were fired. He even told us that his backpack was grazed by a bullet. We spoke with this teenager teenager, along with his parents, his mom and dad were there as well. They gave us permission to ask him about what he experienced. And, you know, he even called his dad while he was in the classroom while this was going on. And he wasn't able to say a lot, but his dad said he could hear all of the sounds, the chaos in the background, and of course could hear how terrified his son was while he was experiencing what was going on in that classroom. And, you know, this 14-year-old student says you hear about stuff like this happening, but you don't expect for it to happen in your classroom, in your school. This family says they're, of course, praying for all of, you know, the victims, anyone who was impacted by this. They're praying for this community. The parents also saying that they really hope to see changes after this, wanting to see more security at the school in hopes of this not happening again. Again, a very difficult story to hear from such a young person who went to school today to learn, to see his friends, to see his classmates and his teacher, and then to have to experience something so awful.
Yasmina, thank you for that live report. And the school year, of course, only just starting just a matter of weeks ago, and we're already having to confront a situation as dire as this. We have our first alert chopper now over the scene. We are giving you live images of what we are looking at right now. We see the Georgia Bureau of Investigation is on the scene. We saw in Yasmina's live report that there were some students walking out with their parents, being able to leave in some situations the premises and be able to reunite with those families. We know that there are a lot of concerned parents out there right now, a lot of concerned students, and unfortunately, far too many parents in mourning this afternoon as well.
We want to head out to our colleague Blair Miller, who is there on the campus of Appalachian High School with the very latest on what you can see from the ground. And Blair, as many of us unfortunately here in the television news business, we've covered these school shootings far too often. And every time it feels like, in many ways, it's the same. A lot of people are outraged at first, but then we feel like nothing happens because it continues to happen. A gunman continues to be able to walk on the campus and open fire on our children.
Yeah, and those emotions, Tracy, certainly will come back to life here in Barrow County, here in Winder. Those questions certainly will come here as well. I think this community, just arriving here in the last few minutes and seeing the faces of people here, looking off camera at people just standing here watching this, just watching unfold. This is a community that is in disbelief right now. It is a very painful day for this community, trying to understand how this happened, but also to the extent of this. In our reporting so far that 4 people are dead, 9 people in the hospital, but to what extent does this go right now? We'll be getting another update from law enforcement here at 4 o'clock. But, you know, you talked about First Alert Chopper being over the scene right now, seeing some of those parents being reunited with their students. I've seen some of that out here as well. And behind me, a bunch of students have been coming and going. And in fact, just saw another ambulance pull up here in the last few minutes as well. Law enforcement, you wouldn't believe how many law enforcement are out here for something like this, to respond, to deal with what's happened here, but also the impact this has on the community when you have parents showing up here, you have community members showing up here. This is a very busy area. We have the high school, but we also have a middle school and a preschool here. And as we approach these afternoon hours, as it will only get busier out here. And so you can imagine the traffic situation as people try to come out here and just parking wherever they can to get close to this school so they can see their child, they can see their loved one and know that they are okay, and know that they're one of the ones who will be coming home tonight, because there are students, there are individuals here tonight who will not be coming home. Tracy, Carla.
Blair, for sure, as we would say in our family, I need to lay eyes on you. I need to put my hands on you to make sure you are safe and sound. And for so many parents, that is what they want to do tonight. All right, so this all happening in Winder, about 40 miles northeast of Metro Atlanta and where we are, about 62 miles away to the west in Marietta. That school district right now responding. Marietta Schools releasing this statement right now saying the Winder community is heavy on our hearts and minds today. I know you join me in sending strength and support to the children, families, and staff of Appalachian High School. This from the superintendent, Grant Rivera. He goes on to say, while many continue to process the emotions that stem from today's tragedy. I'm also mindful that our families may have questions about school safety in our Marietta schools and how we as families talk through these events with our children. As the father of two, I'm sensitive to parents' desire to know how we intend to proactively and reactively address school safety. Equally as important, I'm aware that our children may ask questions that are difficult for us as adults to answer. So basically, I'll get to the end of this. Tomorrow night in Marietta, they plan on hosting a virtual community town hall to address what has actually happened in Winder, some 62 miles away. So they hope to talk about school safety and also talking to parents, as another parent, the superintendent plans to, and to have an opportunity to hear from students as well. Again, that virtual town hall taking place from 8:30 to 9 p.m. Again, these are things we will post on our website at atlantanewsfirst.com for you. If you happen to have a child in Marietta City Schools, that's what they are doing there. Certainly in Winder, in Barrow County, the entire community reacting. If we can put that graphic up, because they do plan on having a community event tonight at 7 p.m. It's at Jug Tavern, where the community can come together and grieve. We got information about that a little earlier from the Winder community and the Barrow community, that as a result of what's happened at Appalachia Schools today, a lot of people can gather there in the park, Carly, and talk to each other, give another person a hug, ask them how they're doing, whether they were directly or indirectly impacted by this. They want to be able to come together and show support as a community. So if you live in Barrow County, Jug Tavern is where you can be tonight to show your support, or even if you're in a neighboring county, go and show your support. This community has gone through so much in a matter of just a few short hours.
And I think when we see images like this, when we hear this happening again, as Marietta City Schools pointed out, it is not only this school affected, it's not only Barrow County that's affected, not even only the state of Georgia. This is a national conversation, and all eyes right now are on Barrow County because parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, they are looking and resonating with this and wondering, oh my goodness, what about my child? What about my child's school? What about my loved one's school? What's going on there? And unfortunately, these incidences just continue to make us go back to, as you mentioned, the other times in history that we have seen this happen all too often. I know I had my friends reaching out to me. I'm sure you had many people reaching out to you personally as well, Tracy, asking what is going on? How is this happening? Because so many people, even if you don't live in Winder, even if you don't live in Barrow County, if you live in Metro Atlanta and beyond, this resonates with you. This impacts you, and you feel this too.
And we're looking at live images right now from our First Alert chopper. You see some students looking like they're making their way off campus right now. From what we were told earlier this afternoon from the Winder Police Department, they were trying to transition the students transition the school from a hard lockdown to a soft lockdown, and trying to release students as quickly as they could and get them reunited with their parents as quickly as they could, and running those buses for a lot of those students who normally ride the bus home. Possibly their parent wasn't able to come and get them, couldn't leave work, whatever the scenario may be, to make sure those students got on buses and were able to get home. So it looks as though many of those students have been reunited at this time. It looks like they're filtering them out, kind of all lining them up, trying to get them out of the stadium area there, certainly making sure they got out of the school facility, the building, the brick and mortar building, to make sure they got to safety, and getting them to the field where they could collectively be surrounded and protected there. So it's looking as though a majority of the students are making their way off of campus right now.
And we know from reporter Yasmin Alston, who was out there speaking with students, I believe he said that they were at the football field for about 3 hours at that point. So it's been several hours that these students have been at the field, have been contained in that area, and now we see from First Alert Chopper that line headed out. We see some tents out there. It looks like they are starting to move these students out, reunite them with family, with loved ones, and get them safely home.
Yeah, it looks as though they had some water out there to make sure they were well hydrated out there in the sun all day. One thing I want to bring up is campus safety. You know, for a lot of parents, I know that is a primary concern. Making sure that when our students go to school tomorrow, in many school districts, they will still go to school tomorrow. Are they safe when they go back to school? I know at this high school, Appalachia High School, our Adam Murphy there on campus telling us that the school does not have metal detectors, and so many schools do not. I know for a lot of people, they think, oh, you know, I'm surprised they don't have metal detectors. There's a lot of schools that don't, despite, unfortunately, school shootings being so common. I can say I have a friend who works in a local school district where they do have a system, and we've reported on this a number of times, kind of almost like an emergency alert system. I know for her, she carries around on her lariat her school badge. They have a little button that they can push in a sequence of ways to let someone know there's a threat, you know, that I saw something, I heard something, you know, lock the doors, get those other students to safety. So whether they have a metal detector or not, so many schools have protocol in place to make sure when there is a threat on campus that the faculty members, the teachers know exactly what to do, lock the doors, get the students to hunker down. And certainly in this case, as we heard from some of the students who our reporters spoke with on campus, that's exactly what those teachers did. As soon as they knew a threat was there close to them, they heard the gunshots, or whether a gunman may have tried to get in the classroom, lock the door, shut the door, get the students kind of barricaded in an area where they can be safe. And it's just unfortunate, Carly, that we have to have these scenarios and students have to be trained on here's what to do if this happens. And unfortunately, in many cases, it's not an if, it's a when.
And that's the sad thing of this. On one hand, you want to, in a way, know that these schools are prepared, that they're running these sorts of exercises and drills for, God forbid, a situation just like this. But on the other hand, you say it's so sad that this is what we have to do. I know investigative reporter Andy Parati was out here earlier talking about how these schools have to run drills just like this every year, almost like a fire drill like you would at school. It has come to that point where it is mandated that these schools have a policy and a procedure in place and that they follow and execute it as a result. And as you mentioned, it sounds like right away, those policies, those things that they train for year after year went into place. Of course, we are still waiting to hear more from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, from law enforcement, to figure out the exact details of how all of this played out earlier today. What we do know is that 4 have died, 9 are hospitalized as a result. A shooter, we are told, is in custody, but still a lot of questions this afternoon as to how this all unfolded, who the alleged gunman was, and who these victims were as well.
And Carly, it looks as though there are a number of people still leaving from inside the school there, and they appear to be kind of cordoned off in the stadium area, of course, around the school, certainly a lot of law enforcement. But we saw some tents up earlier that our First Alert chopper was showing. And with those folks kind of filing out in almost single file line, we will work to find out if that is actually the case. I'm sure school officials want to know, who do we have? We want to check off the list that we make sure every student is accounted for. Are they with their parents? Are their parents here? Make sure they're hydrated. Make sure they get something to eat. Make sure we treat them for any kind of stress that they may have. For so many of them, it's going to take a little while to likely set in. Our Yasmina Alston speaking to that one very young student who recounted the suspected gunman opening fire in the room. Didn't seem like that kind of set in exactly what happened. Speaking about that very matter-of-factly, like, you know, I was on the playground and, you know, here's what happened. It's going to settle in at some point. So I'm sure, and we will work to find out, there are a number of school counselors there at the school to just kind of check on the students, make sure they're okay. You feel okay to go home right now. What do you need? What can we get for you to make sure they have the support they need? And earlier today, Governor Brian Kemp letting everyone know that all the resources that can be sent by way of Barrow County will be sent there to make sure they have everything they need. So it's not just law enforcement making sure the campus is secure. We have to be concerned about our students, our faculty members, our first responders as well, to make sure they get the emotional care and support that they need after a traumatic day like this.
And a traumatic day like this, as we talked about, is not only a local conversation, it is a national conversation that we will continue to stay on top of. We are looking live. This is First Alert Chopper right now. What you are seeing, we see along the sidewalk what appear to be students, possibly parents, walking along. As we saw, they have then exited the stadium and are reuniting these families. This has been, we know, weighing heavily on the hearts of these parents, of these grandparents, of these loved ones. Anyone who knows a child here at this school is probably breathing an extra sigh of relief when they finally see their child walk out of that gate or walk off of the school bus and finally get back home. Now, we have talked about how this conversation is ongoing. We have boots on the ground right now. We have our anchors, Sean Gables and Blair Miller, out there. They are with, who are you with right now, Sean and Blair?
We're with Jimena.
Yeah, and she's a 10th grader here at Appalachia High School. And thank you so much for talking with us. Some of these students have been just coming back and meeting with their parents, and you're here because your mom let us talk with you, and we really appreciate it. And we're so sorry everything you've had to go through today. First and foremost, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's just like, I don't know, it just happens so randomly. Like, everything happens so fast.
So take us back to when you first heard that there was a lot of commotion. What did it sound like? What did you hear? And at what point did you realize this is getting scary?
Well, we were just talking. My teacher was telling us to go, telling us to go back to our seat because we were just reviewing and stuff. And then out of nowhere, we heard banging. My teacher heard banging. She was like, she made a face. She was like, oh, it's nothing. It's just lockers banging. But then we heard da 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 da, like so many times, and then that's when my teacher got so scared. She turned off the lights quickly, and then the doors were already locked because all of the doors in the school are they're already locked.
They have a security measure to protect students. So when you heard that rapid banging, was that gunfire or was that students rushing and just dodging under chairs?
It was gunfires.
How many gunshots did you think that you heard?
They were just rapidly. They were like da 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 da. So probably I don't know, 6 or so, maybe.
And this was in the classroom right next to where you were, right?
Yeah.
So what happened then? I mean, did you take cover, or what happened at that point?
Our teacher told us to immediately go on the corner of the room, and then we were just hiding there in a corner. She was trying to protect us.
It seems like the teacher really went into action really fast. Do you see her acts as being heroic and making sure that the students that were in your classroom were kept safe?
Yeah.
I know this is all unfolding in a way that is really hard to try to understand. I know it's hard for all of us to understand right now. As you walked out of that classroom, what went through your mind?
Well, they told us to put our hands up, so we were hands up, and then we had our hands up, and then in the side, I don't know what I saw, but I probably saw I don't know, probably a body or something. I don't know, because there was a SWAT person covering something, and then as we were walking to our right, that's when I saw 2 girls. They were injured. One of them had blood in her arms, and then one of them was in one of the beds for to take you to the hospital.
What was going through your mind when you saw your classmates, the students you go to school with every day? This isn't a video game. This isn't a TV show. This is real.
I don't know. I was just shocked. I just it's just crazy how you had a regular day and then all this happens so fast, and it's just shocking.
You know, I'm watching your eyes. I see your mom. She's over there watching us while we're doing this interview. When you saw your mom, what was the first thing that you did?
I started crying, and then I just gave her a big hug.
Are you glad you're alive?
Yes, I'm glad.
We're glad you're here.
I'm glad you're here too.
So
Jimena, thank you, and we're sorry for what you've gone through. You've shown incredible bravery to just speak to us. So, Carly and Tracy, we're just starting to get a sense, Blair, of just a lot of the students that we have seen. It has been crowded. I mean, just trying for us to get here on location, there are hundreds and hundreds of cars parked, very hard to get through traffic. A lot of them are concerned parents here to grab their children.
Yeah, and even school buses showing up here as we look off in the distance. We're going to send it back to you now, Tracy and Carly, and we'll keep an eye on the situation out here, talking with families and more of the students out here, those truly impacted firsthand.
All right, we'll see in just a bit. As we continue to take a live look from our First Alert Chopper, we do want to talk about Homeland Security protocols. Unfortunately, Carly, we talked about this happens so much. There are protocols in place for that. We want to head over to our investigative reporter, Andy Parati. Andy, so what happens? Homeland Security has a series of recommendations, right?
Yeah, that's right. You know, while we don't know exactly what happened, and we're going to get more details as law enforcement provides them, the federal government, in particular the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, has recommendations on how the public should react during an active shooter situation. And they split it up into 3 tiers at first. 1, evacuate. 2nd, hide out. 3rd, take action against the shooter. If you can't evacuate or hide out, that means fighting back. That means yelling. That means if you have something that you can throw at the shooter, throw it at the shooter. Then there's some 2nd-tier recommendations that happen when law enforcement arrives. And you heard the young student just talking about some of these. When law enforcement arrives, they recommend staying calm, following the officer's instructions. You saw all of them being taken to the football field in our video from the helicopter earlier. The second one, take down any items in your hands, bags, jackets, small items, anything that may look like a weapon. And finally, immediately raise your hand and spread your fingers, just like that young woman, the student, described what she did when she was leaving the classroom. These are just a few of the dozens of recommendations the U.S. Homeland Security recommends during active shooter situations. And as you just saw, nearly 2,000, that's about how many students go to this high school, by the way. 1,900, nearly 2,000 students at this high school, all taken to that hospital, many of them taken to the football field during the evacuation. And it could give us, these recommendations that we just outlined, could give us some details of exactly what was happening during the active shooter situation at the school earlier this morning. Ladies.
Andy, thank you. What we heard from students that our reporters have been speaking with, they talked about putting their hands up, making sure their hands were shown. They talked about following that. They talked about throwing things in front of the door, barricading the door, trying to secure the classroom as best as possible. And it is exactly those things that these schools have to make an effort to prepare for. And I remember as a reporter covering drills just like this and speaking to the investigators that lead these sorts of drills, that do this kind of training. And it's exactly what Andy said, that you either have to, if you're in a situation where you have to hide, but if you're in a situation where you can fight back, do.
Yeah, this situation certainly unfolding as the day goes on. Earlier this afternoon, we heard from the Barrow County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Judd Smith, confirming really what we all knew was the case here, that an evil thing had happened at this school. Right now, that investigation, he says, is fluid. They gave an update a little earlier this afternoon. We do expect to hear from them within the next half an hour or so as they have gathered more details. Again, a number of law enforcement officials are there, GBI, FBI, ATF as well, I believe, and also Sheriff's Office deputies from across the metro area, as well as local police officials too. And certainly our thoughts, our prayers are with the families there at Appalachia High School. And if you would like to come out and help support that community, there will be an opportunity to do so at Jug Tavern tonight at 7 p.m., where the community can gather together, join together, and grieve the loss of 4 lives today. We are still working to learn more information. Atlanta News First starts now.
Atlanta News First starts now with breaking news.
And our breaking news coverage continues now live here on the ground in Winder and Barrow County, where there has been a school shooting. The latest information we are getting is that 4 people have been killed. 9 others are in the hospital. We do know, Sean, that suspect is in custody, but the impact this is having on this community is far and deep, and it is hitting so very hard right now.
You know, we, on our way here, we're just getting a sense of just the scope of a very small community about 60 miles northeast of Atlanta, and there are cars just lined up by the hundreds, blocking roads, very difficult to get through. Parents just doing whatever they can to come and make sure that their child is okay and come and get them. We just spoke to eyewitnesses. A sophomore Her name was Zamina at Appalachia High School. And her mother, she allowed us to speak to her. Her mother, too nervous to speak on TV, but said that this is the worst day of her life. That she worked a couple of blocks away from Appalachia High School. When she saw what had happened on social media first, and she immediately called 911. And to give you some perspective, the demand on emergency personnel responding to this, she called 911 and her call was dropped. So she took off and came straight to the school. Fortunately, her daughter is okay. She spoke to us, and just the details.
It's so powerful. She was in a classroom right next to where some of the gunfire started, and they immediately took cover. One thing that stood out to me, she said, as the students started to take cover there, they started texting their families, and she texted her mother saying, "I love you."
You know, and it's interesting that when I heard her say that, because there's so many schools that are adopting these brand new policies where they are banning students and confiscating their phones away, not allowing them to have phones. And I'm a parent, and you want your kids to focus and have their education, but her cell phone, she says she attributed it to being able to give her mother a last message. She was right next to the shooting in the next classroom over. The teacher, she said the doors automatically locked. The teacher turned the lights off, told all the students to gather in a corner. And the students, including Zamina, said they were texting their parents and their families saying we may not make it out alive. It's so scary. I mean, my heart.
I know, it breaks hearing that. And she described walking out of that classroom and seeing people with injuries on their arms. She thought she saw a body. And you think this is a sophomore in high school? The fact that they have to see this is truly heartbreaking.
It is a domestic war zone, and what we're seeing here is a heavy police presence. There's choppers flying above the air. We do know that the suspect has been apprehended, but far-reaching here. This story is far from over, and so many chapters to unfold.
So many questions, and we know that one of the victims was flown to Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, and our coverage continues now with our colleague Patrick Quinn, who's there outside Grady. Patrick?
Blair, as you mentioned, according to the GBI, 4 people were killed as part of this active shooter situation where you are in Winder. 9 others were rushed to area hospitals, and we do know that one of those taken to the hospital was taken here to Grady Memorial Hospital. I just checked in with hospital officials. They're not able to give us a status update. They confirmed they were brought here at 12:53 this afternoon. So here we are roughly 2 hours later, and as we know, trauma surgeons inside, these are some of the best in the region. This is a level 1 trauma center. They certainly are likely hard at work to ensure the best case scenario for this gunshot victim. We're not sure if this was a student, a staff member, a teacher. We're trying to learn more about this victim here in downtown Atlanta. And again, I was able to confirm with the hospital spokesperson that as of now, they have just received one of those gunshot victims. 8 others went to different hospitals across the region. So while the heart of this incident happened in Winder, much of the state is feeling the impacts of it today. And we heard earlier about how different school districts across the region are reacting to this shooting. Marietta City Schools, they weighed in. Also, Atlanta Public Schools here in Atlanta. Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens said he's been in touch with Atlanta Police Chief Darren Shearbaum to ensure that extra patrols are going to area schools here in Atlanta just as a point of precaution, just to ensure that any student who is back at school today, they just see maybe an officer and just can feel maybe a sense of safety, as the rest of the state is certainly reckoning with the tragedy that's happening in Barrow County right now. I do just want to highlight once more again here at Grady, 1 gunshot victim taken here. We are not sure of their status at this point. A lot of us are waiting right outside the entrance here at Grady for any update from a hospital official. As soon as we get it, we will pass that information on to you. Blair, Sean.
Patrick, thank you so much. And we've been seeing parents be reunited with their children who are students here at Appalachia High School, and some of the students have been released from the school. But Sean, as you know, when there's a situation like this, information can run quickly and be inaccurate here on these campuses when there's something like this.
It's a very fluid situation. We are hearing unconfirmed reports of a lot of different things that we're not going to share until we are able to vet and verify. We know that the school district is going, along with law enforcement, is going to hold a press conference in about 30 minutes. That's where we have Adam Murphy. Adam, you are there right now awaiting this press conference. What is the latest that you're hearing so far?
Well, good afternoon, Sean and Blair. Yes, we're here in the media staging area, which is on school grounds, and we anticipate in about 25 minutes that Barrow County Sheriff Judd Smith will give us an update. We had a news conference earlier this afternoon with very limited information. The sheriff said that this was an ever-changing incident and investigation, and therefore they wanted to make sure they had all of their ducks in a row and had gathered all the necessary information before providing an update to the media. And there is a swarm of news media, local, national, and regional, that are all here waiting on new information to come out at about 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time here at Apalachee High School in Barrow County in the Winder community. Now, what I'm basically hearing at this point in time is that we should learn more about the suspect that has been taken into custody. There are a lot of rumors and different pieces of information floating around about the age and whether this person was a student. We're going to hopefully learn more about that. We also hope to learn more about the victims. And we know that 4 died in this shooting and there are multiple injuries. So there's a lot of information to come and to eventually be released. So we hope to learn that. Another thing we're hoping to find out too, as I mentioned earlier, I was informed by some of the students that attend the school that there are no metal detectors here, and maybe not at any of the schools in Barrow County. That may be something that is looked at a little bit closer as a result of what has happened out here today. And also we want to know, this school is assigned 2 school resource officers, and one of our questions is whether they were here and on duty at the time that this occurred. And we know that the shots started, the shots were fired, as I understand, or at least the word came into police shortly after 9:30 this morning. So it's unclear whether school resource officers were able to intervene immediately or not. So we're going to hopefully learn more about that as well. But again, it's just been sad story after sad story from parent and student reuniting. I mean, they're glad that they certainly are okay, those parents that are able to reunite with their children that made it out with any harm. But it's been, a sad day for everyone, and many of those parents felt very gracious and very grateful, I should say, but also wanted to offer up their prayers and thoughts for the others that were injured. Now, I was able to obtain some video from a student, and we have permission from the parent to use this footage that we want to show you right now. I have a couple of pieces of footage, one showing law enforcement officers running into classrooms and down hallways in the school building. They were armed in tactical gear just to make sure that everyone was safe and accounted for. There's also a little piece of video we hope to share with you that shows what appears to be an assault rifle that was found, or a video of one that was found on the ground in the hallway of the school. Now, it's unclear whether that was the weapon that was used to harm many of the faculty and staff and students that were in the school, but we wanted to share this video. This is the first time many of you have seen any footage from within the school building at the time of the incident. Very chaotic and frantic moments for everyone involved. We are hoping to gather new details, as I mentioned, coming up here shortly in the next 20 to 25 minutes at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Sheriff Judd Smith will come back with other law enforcement officials and hopefully answer some questions and provide some new details, guys.
Adam, thank you so much. And, when something like this happens, this is a small community. About 20,000 people or so live here in Winder, and about 1,900 students go to this school. And so you have people here wondering, how did this happen here? But the national question becomes, how did this happen again?
And, it's interesting you mentioned that, because you don't want to insert politics into this, but obviously whenever you have a school shooting, gun control issues are one of the major platforms as we enter into election 2024 in November. We just got a statement from the Reverend Raphael Warnock, who's a senator here in Georgia, and his exact quote is, "At least 4 dead, 30 injured. Only weeks into the new school year, my heart breaks for the families of the victims. Apalachee High School and every student, the entire Winder community is in my prayers, but we can't pray only with our lips. We must pray by taking action."
Adam was talking about those reunifications happening here at the school, but they're also happening all around us. In fact, there's a preschool right across the street from where we are, and I was seeing a dad just pick up his 2 kids, and I can't think what's going through his mind to think that his 2 little kids were this close to violence and who knows what happened.
Well, we
today.
just spoke with an eyewitness, a 10th grader who attends Appalachia High School. She was in the classroom directly next to where the shooting happened. She was able to speak because her mother allowed us to speak. She was too nervous to talk, but the mother was in tears. She was visibly shaking. And as a parent, both you and I are, this is a concern of every parent who has their kids going to school. Are they going to be safe? A lot of schools take safety measures. We heard from that eyewitness says that the doors to her classroom, as soon as they knew that there was a threat in the school, all the doors locked. The teacher turned off the lights, according to this 10th grader that we spoke to, and rushed all the students to the corner of the room to get away from the door. And they were texting each other. They were texting their parents. This school apparently allows the students to have their cell phones. Right. The students were texting their parents. Exact quote that we got from the 10th grader that we spoke to, she told her mother, "I may not make it out alive. I'm scared. I want to tell you that I love you." I mean, that brings tears to my eyes.
It's awful, and I think about the conversations that the parents are going to have tonight with their kids, but I also think about the parents who may not have a loved one who comes home tonight. We talk about that preschool right across the street. There's a middle school right down the street. Our Yasmina Alston is live outside the middle school there, and Yasmina, just the heartbreak around this community is just so extreme.
Yeah, there is just so much heartbreak, and you can feel that still from the families that are walking to their cars coming from the football stadium, or even coming from the high school, the middle school, which is right next to the high school. So many parents who are relieved that they were able to get their students. Behind me, you can see that there is still a police presence here as they work to dismiss all of the middle school students. They were on lockdown too, not far from the high school. We spoke with parents who stood outside of the school waiting until they could get their children because they didn't know if anything was happening at this school, which it was not, but it was still a great concern for them. And you all mentioned speaking with one of the students who was in the high school at the time of the shooting, and we also spoke with a 14-year-old student along with his parents. They gave us permission to ask him about what he experienced, and he says he was in one of the classrooms when someone with a gun came into the classroom and started shooting. He described seeing some of his classmates laying on the floor injured, and that of course is incredibly traumatizing for someone to see. He talked about how his teacher jumped into action after that person with a gun left the classroom, closing the door, locking it, putting bookshelves in front of the door, making sure that everyone stayed calm in the classroom. And Sean, you mentioned the student that you talked to, that she, called or texted with her mom while the shooting was happening. And the student we spoke with did the same thing. He called his dad, and his dad told us that all he heard in the background was loud noises and chaos, and he could hear the fear in his son's voice as he tried to describe what was going on. And I do want to let you hear a little bit from that 14-year-old student who shared what he experienced in those terrifying moments.
I'm just doing my work in class, and something just told me to look to my left, because I'm sitting by the door, I'm sitting like this and the door is like this. So something just told me to look to my left. I look to my left, I see a kid he had a big gun, it was like an AR with he got his head sticking out the door with the gun. And then then I got up, I started running, he started shooting like 10 times. He shot at least 10 times. And then I ran to the back of the classroom. I dived behind the desk, and my teacher had got in front of me he was guarding. But the gunshots were so close to me, my ears started ringing real bad. The whole classroom was smoking.
And that student says that he just continues to replay this over and over in his mind. He can't get those images out of his mind. He was so relieved when he saw his parents and, was able to hug them, and they were, able to just hold each other in those moments when they were reunited. His grandmother was here as well. His sisters, they go to the middle school, so he was very happy that they were okay as well. Just a lot of emotion out here, a lot of heartbreak. Of course, very, very devastating for those who experience this.
And Yasmina, thank you for that report. We are have a special guest with us. This is Isabella. She is a 7th grader at the middle school that there was a complete lockdown once the shooting happened. And Isabella, you've been in your first period classroom from this morning until now?
Yeah.
And what were you guys doing in the classroom?
Well, when the lockdown started, we just had to sit in the corner for like a really long time. And we had to wait till officers came to escort us to the bathroom when we had to go.
Did you know what was happening, or?
No, my friends were freaking out thinking that there was a shooter in our school, but we didn't hear anything. My friends could hear helicopters, so they were like, oh my god, there's helicopters. I was just telling them it could be just like a bomb threat or some other type of threat until like our teacher said that she didn't know what was going on, and they were like, oh my god. Everyone was scared, but I was trying to calm everyone down.
So when you say everyone was scared, what were they doing?
So at first they were just like, you know, thinking it was fake, and then they were just, after everyone knew that it wasn't fake, they were just like, some people were like breathing heavily, and then a bunch of people were like panicking and saying, be quiet, because a bunch of people were talking and laughing.
How scared was everyone? I mean, I have a middle schooler at home, and I'm thinking, I don't know how he'd be able to handle something like that, but how scared was everyone?
They weren't that scared. They were just like, because we did a bunch of practices last year where, you know, they wouldn't tell us it was a drill, so we had a bunch of practices last year about it. So they weren't that scared. They just knew what to do after they figured out. But they were still a little scared and panicked.
So Isabella, when you saw your dad and you were reunited, what was the first thing you told him?
What was that in his hands? Because he had like wires in his hands.
But were you glad to see him and know you're okay?
Yeah. My mom, my sisters, and one of my friends that didn't go to school today, when I looked at my phone to check what time it was before he came and picked me up from school, my mom was like, are you I hope you're okay. I love you. And then my 2 older sisters said, are you okay? And then my friend said, OMG, are you okay? Are you guys okay? So, yeah.
Well, Isabella, we're glad you're okay. Thank you so much.
And I think that's one of the hardest parts as we talk to students like Isabel and others out there, is that, you know, this is the 4th week of school, and these students should be celebrating the start of a new beginning, a new chapter in their lives, and today all of that is being shattered by the actions of what's happened here this afternoon.
Well, we have so much more that we are speaking to eyewitnesses out here. Isabella, thank you so much. You can go back with your father. And Dad, thank you. Dad did not want to go on camera. He too was a little shaken by all this and scared, but very happy that his child is alive. Unfortunately, there are 4 who are not going back home to their families. And we are awaiting a press conference that should be happening shortly with law enforcement. Our Adam Murphy is there awaiting that press conference to get more details about who the injured are, who may have passed away. We do have to wait until next of kin is notified, but a tragic day here in Winder, and there's no words to say how sorry we are for those who are going through it.
And this community of people just showing up, just heartbroken, and just simply wanting answers and really wanting to know that their children are safe. So that news conference is set to begin here around 4 o'clock. In the meantime, we're going to send it back to the studio with Tracy and Carly.
Blair, Sean, thank you so much for your live report out there. Our live team coverage continuing now on Atlanta News First. And Tracy, just hearing from those students and seeing the video that Adam Murphy showed of what appeared to be an eyewitness there in the classroom, it just really makes you exhale and go, wow. These students having to distinguish between what was reality and what wasn't reality in real time, and just the gravity of what happened.
Yeah, and for so many of them, you know, there are calls that come into schools quite often that are not true. So a lot of them trying to figure out, okay, is this really happening, or is it a fake, or is it real? And when reality sets in and it's real, man, that's something you do not want your child to have to go through at all. All right, we've heard from a number of local leaders and politicians, from the governor, mayor from Atlanta, and from the president and vice president as well. We want to head over to our Doug Reardon, who's at the Georgia State Capitol right now. And Doug, we've heard from the governor and local officials, and we've talked about this before. Unfortunately, every time one of these school shootings happens, and it happens often, it becomes a political event that everyone rallies around, and then it seems like weeks go by and it's forgotten.
Right, and a lot of lawmakers are trying to make that not the case, because say what you will about any school shooting, and we have so many of them every year in the country, but it is always different when it happens in your own backyard, and that is what Georgia lawmakers are telling us. A lot of people that we talked to didn't want to rush into talking about policy just yet. They wanted to wait and see how things played out, and of course make sure that these victims and these families have what they need to get through this very difficult time. That is the focus as of right now, whether we talk to Democrats, Republicans, local or state, or even federal lawmakers. They are just now thinking of the people who are all caught up in this today over in Winder. And so you mentioned the governor. He tweeted that his thoughts and prayers are with those individuals. He said he was making resources available, and when we asked for specifics, he said GEMA, Department of Public Safety, Georgia Bureau of Investigations, Georgia State Police, they are all on scene there assisting with this. They have all the resources that they need from the state to continue with the investigation and with helping these victims, as well as the FBI and Department of Homeland Security also on the ground there assisting, as they do with any large mass casualty event such as this one. And we also got a chance to talk to state and federal lawmakers here from Georgia. Representative Mike Collins, who was actually traveling as part of a Georgia delegation up to Michigan for a campaign event, got a chance to speak to him on the phone just a couple of minutes ago, right before we joined you here on air. He said it was a tough day, a sad day. He said this was heartbreaking for him as the representative from that district over in Barrow County. And so he is actually going to be driving back from Michigan tonight to be in district, to be speaking to some of those families, as well as he mentioned the staff and law enforcement who were there helping these kids get to safety. We also had a couple of words from President Joe Biden, who is being briefed, or was briefed, on this situation. He called this horrific and senseless. We know that Attorney General Merrick Garland also brought it up during a press conference that was supposed to be about Russian interference in the 2024 election. He paused and took a minute to note the sadness that he had over this shooting in Georgia. And, you know, as far as what is being done or what has been done in past legislative sessions, when it comes to gun safety, really not much. There were two things on the table this year: a red flag law. Of course, we know those red flag laws give judges or family members or law enforcement the ability to take firearms away from people if they are exhibiting signs that could lead to danger. That was left on the table without passage this past session. Also, a safe storage law that would require, by law, safe storage of firearms was also left on the table. It failed to pass. And of course, Georgia has a biennial legislative session, so things are good for 2 years, but that ended after last session did. And so these will have to be completely reintroduced again starting next session when it begins this winter. And so it's really, again, too early for a lot of lawmakers to comment at all on this, nonetheless talk about legislation. We also know that Governor Kemp this past year had allocated $45,000 per state school to make exactly this: safety and infrastructure improvements to keep students and staff safe from exactly the type of thing that happened today. We talked to Representative Collins, I mentioned before. He was not aware of any recent updates as far as safety goes that had taken place at Appalachia since that announcement of the allocated funds came out. And so we're just going to continue getting more information and maybe some more ideas from lawmakers on how to prevent this happening from happening here in Georgia, as we see it happen so often around the country. We're going to hear from more lawmakers coming up in subsequent hours of our coverage. But for now, we're going to send it back to you guys in the studio.
All right, Doug, thank you. Stand by, and of course, we'll come back to you in just a bit. And this is not just an issue for the Barrow County community there at Appalachia High School. This is an issue for communities all across Georgia. Not that long ago, our investigative reporter, Andy Parati, gave us some information, some details. Between 2022 and 2024, here in Georgia alone, 97 incidents of gun-related violence happening at schools. 97 gun-related incidents, and that's just in our state alone. 97. Guess what? Today, that's now 98. It is one of those things that we look at, and for so many of us and who have children, that's the culture that they're now growing up in, is that this is what happens at schools from time to time. And it's sad to think, when I was younger, Carly, I know when you were younger too, we didn't have to worry about that. And now children are worried about hunkering down in their classrooms and making sure the door is locked if there is something like popping that they may hear in the hallways. We continue to take a live look right now from our First Alert chopper at Appalachia High School there in Winder in Barrow County, where just after 9:30 this morning, 9 o'clock or so, officials there at the school got word about an active shooter there on campus. And this is a story we have been covering since then, over the school, at the school, on the grounds. They're speaking with parents, speaking with students with the parents' permission, talking about what happened at the school earlier today. What we have learned, the GBI confirming 4 dead, multiple people hurt, 9 taken to the hospital, 1 suspect in custody. That suspect is alive, and we speculate, we believe now that they would be speaking with law enforcement. They are trying to get as much information from that person as possible. Some of that information may come out in a news conference that we do expect to happen in the next 4 or 5 minutes or so. The Barrow County Sheriff's Office says they plan to give us more information. Barrow County Sheriff Judd Smith did give us some information earlier this afternoon. Not much. They were just trying to gather those details and make sure they had the most accurate information. We do expect to hear more from them coming up at 4 o'clock. And of course, we will bring that to you live.
And what we want our viewers to know, Tracy, right? What we want you at home to know is, as we have talked about, this is a team effort here. We have the Georgia Bureau of Investigation out there. We have local law enforcement out there. There are a number of different investigators that have all teamed up for this. So what they are doing is they are coordinating their efforts right now. They have emergency response. It's a multifaceted approach. So in this press conference, which we are anticipating now in less than 5 minutes, they are gathering their information to bring us the latest details. And that's what we want to do at Atlanta News First. We want to bring you the most factual, up-to-date information. And this has just been a heavy day there in Winder, in Barrow County, and for the state. We know Doug speaking with our local leaders, but as they mentioned, until we know more details, a little bit too soon for them to even talk about policy. But what we do know is that these sorts of things are something that students, teachers, and faculty have had to train for time and time again. We just spoke with a 10th grader out there, or a middle schooler out there, who said that they had to take a pause to go, is this a drill, or did this actually happen? Because as she noted, they went through a drill just like this several times last year. So it's one of those situations where, of course, you want these schools to be prepared, but it's unfortunate that they have to be prepared in a situation like this.
And we've been hearing from a number of political leaders as well, as Doug mentioned. Certainly heard from the governor, the mayor of the city of Atlanta, from President Biden. Through the White House, basically said he's grateful for the first responders and that the White House will provide support as is needed there in the Barrow County community. And the president saying, quote, "This is not normal. School should be safe." And just moments ago, hearing from the chair of the Democratic Party of Georgia, Congresswoman Nikema Williams, saying our children should not have to fear for their lives when they walk into their classroom. We mourn the lives of those who have been cut short. Our heartbreak is not enough, though. Georgians need immediate, urgent action to improve gun safety because we all need to live in communities free from gun violence, end quote, from the chair of the Democratic Party of Georgia, Congresswoman Nikema Williams. And again, this is a story we continue to cover. A live look right now from our First Alert chopper over the field there at Appalachia High School. From this distance, you can see how large that campus is. More than, I think it's 1,900 students who go to school there. This all focusing there on the campus of the high school, but the middle school that was nearby, other schools nearby were locked down as well in Barrow County. Again, to recap for you, 4 dead, multiple hurt. This, according to the GBI, 9 taken to area hospitals, one suspect in custody. And again, as you look live, it looks as though officers and parents and many others just trying to make sure they are coordinating everyone to make sure all those students are accounted for. And we do expect to hear from law enforcement there in Barrow County very, very soon. But as we come up on the top of the hour, we do want to remind you we've got you covered right here on Atlanta News First. Atlanta News First starts now.
Atlanta News First starts now with breaking news.
Our breaking news continues here at 4. I'm Sean Gables along with Blair Miller. We are in Winder, right outside of Appalachia High School, where 4 students have been killed in a school shooting. There is a lot of traffic here, heavy police presence, and parents rushing, park their cars, some of them in the middle of the streets, just to be reunited with their children.
And as we see school buses show up here off in the distance, there are many questions as to what happened in this small, knit, close community here today where this shooting has taken place. We're waiting for a news conference to begin here outside the school here. It's scheduled for 4 o'clock. They ran an update a little earlier, a couple of hours ago, and said they would be giving us an update with more answers to what. There are so many questions in this community about what happened here today.
And there has been such a huge community outpouring that is happening at this hour. We've just learned within the last 15 minutes that there is a huge prayer vigil that has been set here in Winder.
This will be taking place at the Winder United Methodist Church. They've opened up their house of worship for today and into the evening so people in this community have a place to go. There are about 1,900 students who go to school here, and you can imagine this community is only about 20,000, and so when something like this happens, it certainly has quite an impact on not just the school, but the neighborhoods around it and our entire country.
And there are a lot of rumors and a lot of communication that is being spread on social media. A lot of it is not vetted, unconfirmed. We are awaiting that press conference to happen within this hour from law enforcement and also from the school district regarding who the 4 fatalities are. Who are the 9 students that have been injured?
We also hope to get more information on the suspect, who we understand is in custody and is alive. That information coming to us from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation today. But who is that shooter is the question many people have. Is it a student at this school? And what happened in the moments leading up to this to get us to where we are right now?
And the other questions is just the security of the school. We have spoken to many of the eyewitnesses here. We had heard from a 10th grader who told us that the minute the shooting happened inside Appalachia High School, that the doors to her classroom, she was next to where the shooting was happened, immediately locked on their own. The teacher turned off the lights. The students were rushed into the corner of the room and to shield together to avoid any gunfire from hitting them. No one hit them inside that classroom, but she said that when they walked out, when everything was settled, the dust had settled and they were allowed to leave the room, she saw many injuries, a lot of bloodshed on the floor, students with visible injuries, a lot of blood.
And seeing the faces of these 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th graders is just so heartbreaking to see, what they're going through. This is the 4th week of school. This should be a celebration for this community, for these students who are starting the year, but now this year is marked by what has happened here today. So many questions about what happened. I know you've been at these situations before. I was in Uvalde, I've been at Virginia Tech, and the amount of grief that hangs over these communities, it's so hard to get it across to people at home who may be watching this, because we all hurt when we see these kinds of things happen, and when we talk to people about how they've been impacted, especially the students impacted here today.
And we have seen this, as you mentioned, Blair, time and time again. And the question, many parents have sent emails to our station, when is this going to end? This is a political conversation that's leading into the November election. A lot of local legislators have already given comments, including Senator Raphael Warnock. And so we will make sure those are posted on our website at atlantanewsfirst.com. But our Chelsea Beinpour, she is out on location. And Chelsea, you've been asking questions about the injuries, about the students. What have you learned so far?
Yeah, we're on Tom Miller Road. This is about a half a mile from the school. This is where we have been today as parents have been picking up their children and bringing them down this street to get back up to where they parked about a mile away. We did speak with a mother and daughter. The daughter was a 15-year-old sophomore here at Appalachian High School. She says when those shots rang out and that lockdown went into place, she immediately texted her mom. She said, "I love you. There's a lockdown. There might be a shooting going on." She said her mom replied right away and said, "I'm coming from work to get you." And then that student told us that she passed her cell phone around to other students in her class so they could also text their parents and let them know that they were okay. So eventually she described that police came and they were escorted outside safely to the football field. We know then her mom got to be reunited with her about 2 hours later. They described that very emotional reunion. We have an interview from them that'll be coming up a little bit later. But again, this is a road just past the school where people have been getting back to their cars this afternoon. We have seen a little bit more traffic coming down the street here. It was closed for most of the day, but it looks like police have reopened it down there for flow of traffic, guys.
Just to recap of what we have learned so far, we know here at Appalachian High School there has been a shooting. 4 students, four people. They have not identified yet who has been killed, nor the individuals who have been hurt. We know that at least 9 people are hurt. There is going to be a press conference. Our CNN is reporting, that is one of our affiliate stations. CNN is reporting that there was a phone call that was made to Appalachian High School this morning warning that 5 schools were being targeted for gunfire and that Appalachian High School would be the first. There's a lot of questions to still unfold, and that will be questions we'll be asking at this press conference.
Now, our understanding of the timeline looking back on this is that this all started around 9:30 this morning here at this school, and ever since then, parents have been showing up here trying to be reunited with some of their children, some of the students here at this school. And you may not be able to see here behind us, but there's a football stadium off in the distance. That's where they took many of the students, as we saw from First Alert Chopper that was over the scene there, and that's where many of the students were held, and so they could be reunited with their parents, which has been such a process, as you can imagine. You have the high school out here, but you also have a preschool right across the street, you have a middle school right nearby, and so you can imagine the crush of people that show up here when something like this happens. They just want to make sure their children are okay and alive.
And I know our Madeline Montgomery is also on location. And Madeline, I don't know if you can show the perspective, but it is an absolute traffic jam. On our way to getting here, I know you're in Gwinnett County, but on our way to approaching Winder, which is about 60 miles northeast of Atlanta, it is it's clogged up. Parents are rushing to pick up their children. The lockdown was released within the last hour and a half. And so, Madeline, tell us, what are you seeing in Gwinnett County?
Sean, I'm actually over here in Barrow County. I'm over here at the hospital at Northeast Georgia Medical Center here in Barrow County, and what I've seen is a different kind of traffic jam because this is the spot, I'm being told by the public relations specialist here with the hospital, that there are several of the victims of the shooting here at this hospital, and we've seen a number of people who look high school aged going into this facility. I spoke with a man who works at the Supermercado across the street who says he's never seen so many people at this hospital before, so many police at this hospital before, and according to the public relations expert here, she says that there are 6 total victims here at this location that they have with Northeast Georgia Medical Center. She says 2 of the victims at this location are gunshot victims, and she says that their Brazelton location has 1 victim that is not a gunshot victim, and at their level 1 trauma center in Gainesville they have 1 gunshot victim. And she says that all of the gunshot victims that their facilities have do not have life-threatening injuries, so that's good news. Though they were shot, they are believed to be able to survive those injuries. And then she says that all of the other victims they have that are not gunshot injuries but are inside of their facility, so inside of the Northeast Georgia Medical Center facilities, are people who are suffering from panic attacks or anxiety symptoms. So that's what brought them to the hospital. And so again, we're here at the Barrow County location, and we've seen an influx of people just coming into here, going into the emergency room. We've seen police cars outside of there. We've seen people that look about teenage who are going in and out, and just a number of families going inside and confirming with the folks who work at businesses in this area that it's just a lot more people than they're used to seeing out here at this time. For now, reporting live out here in Winder, I'm Madeline Montgomery, Atlanta News First.
Madeline, thank you for the update there. And it brings up a good point, because we talk about the injuries from this shooting that took place here today, but as some have been pointing out, their injuries may not be from the shooting. You don't know what was happening in some of these classrooms or in the hallways as students were rushing to get out. You know, some students said they were running and they saw other students running, and so it'll be interesting to see, you know, what was happening and all the chaos that was happening inside the school at the time of all this.
Well, again, Georgia is now thrust back into the national spotlight, not for a reason that we're proud of. This school shooting is capturing the attention of many political candidates. I know Doug Reardon is outside of the state's capital, and Doug, you've been talking to local leaders. Also, former President Donald Trump also chiming in on the tragedy that has happened here in Winder.
Yes, just in the last couple of minutes, he took to Truth Social and posted a very brief statement on this, saying that his heart is with those who were affected, and also going on to say that these children were taken far too soon by what he called a sick and deranged monster. We also heard earlier in the day from President Joe Biden. He released a statement calling this horrific and senseless. And all throughout the day from Washington, we have been hearing from people who are telling us their hearts are filled with sorrow for these families here in Winder, Georgia. We know that Attorney General Merrick Garland took a moment during a press conference that was supposed to be about Russian interference in the upcoming election to say exactly that he was thinking about these families. We know that there were also a number of federal agencies that were on scene, including the FBI out there in Barrow County today, and all the way up to our state leaders. We have been hearing reaction from this. In fact, House Speaker John Burns, a Republican, just came out with a statement of his own saying that he is a father and a grandfather, and he cannot imagine what it's like for these families to go through this. He also noted that Georgia has tried to make some investments in recent years and months even in mental health, which they passed quite a bit of mental health legislation this past year, as well as school safety. We noted in our last hour that not too long ago, within the last 12 months, Governor Brian Kemp had allocated $45,000 each for state schools to go ahead and use that to implement safety upgrades. We don't know, even after talking to U.S. Representative Mike Collins, who represents the district that Appalachia is in, if the high school had used any of that money since those allocations were made to make any safety upgrades. I think it's just a little too soon for a lot of people to start even talking about some of the policy around this and how it could become an issue in the November election, which we are now just about 62 days away from. I think right now the focus from everyone that we have been hearing from, whether it's at the federal level, at the state level, or even at the local level, is that they just want to focus on the families right now before they start talking about any preventative measures, legislation that could come out of this. Right now they are just thinking about these families and, of course, the students and staff that were faced down with every student and staff's worst nightmare in that school shooting that happened earlier today. And so we are going to continue talking to lawmakers. We're going to be airing more of their tweets and their comments, and even some interviews with folks that we've talked to today about how this is going to impact Georgians, not just in Barrow County, but of course all across our state of Georgia, as they look to try and find ways to prevent this from happening. Because as one lawmaker told us, it is always different. You always look at this with different eyes when it's happening in your backyard. So we'll see you throughout the rest of our coverage this afternoon, but for now, we'll send it back to you in the studio.
And Doug, you know, it's interesting you brought up the point. Doug, it's interesting that you brought up the point, how do we prevent this from happening again? We have spoken to eyewitnesses who were inside Appalachia High School when the shooting took place, in the classroom directly next to the shooting. And we were told that some of the procedures that the teachers went through were drills that they had done before this incident even happened. And that we heard was that the doors automatically locked. The teachers quickly went into action, turned off the lights, and huddled students away from the gunfire into a corner. But the question now, is that enough?
We spoke with a 10th grader who told us at first they thought it was some books that had fallen down. And she said as it went on, they realized it was gunfire. They all huddled in the classroom. People started pulling out their phones. So she texted her mother saying, I text her saying, I don't know if I'm going to see you again, but that I love you. And when you hear students describe that has been their reality today, it's truly so imaginable what they've been through and what this community is now going through. We were talking about the news conference that was set to begin at 4 o'clock to get an update from law enforcement. That has now been pushed back to 4:30.
Let's go to Adam Murphy. Adam, you're outside of that press conference and waiting for it to start. And there's a lot of unanswered questions, primarily who were the 4 victims that lost their lives today and the injured. More details about them. There's so much to learn.
So much to learn. We hope to gather a little bit of new information for you in the next 15 minutes. The GBI pushing out an alert telling us that that news briefing has now been scheduled for 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are ready for that. We hope to learn new information, as you mentioned, about those who lost their lives, those that were injured, and also the shooter. Now, at this point in time, I can tell you, I spoke with many students and their parents. They talked about the terrifying moments in the classroom while they were in school and they heard gunfire in the hallways. Many of the students were immediately rushed or evacuated out of the building back to the stadium, and they said that they were told to get out so quickly that a lot of them left their phones behind and had no way to communicate with their parents to let them know that they were okay. But I do want to share one piece of video with you. After speaking with a student that heard the gunfire, we have permission from her mother to show this video. She got out her cell phone and shot some footage as law enforcement officers rushed into the classroom. They were wearing tactical gear. They were armed. They came in to make sure that all the students were accounted for. Also, you will probably see with this footage, they go out into the hallway as they're escorting some of these students out and trying to evacuate them out of the building. There were several law enforcement officers armed in the hallway as well. It was very chaotic and very terrifying. One can only imagine, what this might do to a child to witness and experience something so traumatic. But we hope to gain some new information about what led to all of this. I've reported now several times, based on some students' testimony to me, is that there were no metal detectors. So that's something I'm sure that might come up. We also want to know about the school resource officers. Were they on duty? Were they here at the school at the time of this? What was their response? Did they see this happening? So a lot of questions still remain, but a very difficult day for so many in this community, and any parent for that matter, that has to hear about something like this happen, especially when it happens in their school to their child. We will have new information for you hopefully here within the next 15 to 20 minutes, guys.
And Adam, before we let you go, I just want to ask you this question. CNN is reporting this now, and it is drawing a lot of ire from parents in this community. And according to law enforcement, there was a phone call that was made to Apalachee High School early this morning, alerting the school staff that there would be 5 school shootings, and Apalachee High School would be one of the first. There's still no determination who made that phone call, who accepted the phone call, and if the school took any proactive steps. I know that you'll be asking those questions too.
Well, certainly, and if that really happened, then one would think immediately you would place all of the schools that were mentioned on lockdown until that could be vetted and cleared. We don't know if that happened here. We know just after 9:30, that's when reports came in to law enforcement about an active shooter in the school here at Apalachee High School in Barrow County. We don't know, though, exactly when that lockdown was activated. Was it activated immediately after receiving that call, or was it activated once the shooter had access to the building? That's a very important question. We need to know that timeline as well. To that point, I will say I spoke with a parent of a child that attended the elementary school, which is nearby. He was in the area because they were on lockdown as well when all of this took place, and he was waiting to reunite with his child, and he mentioned the same thing. He mentioned that he had heard reports that there might be shootings involving multiple schools in the area. So that is certainly something that will be brought up during this news briefing, and we hope to get some new information and some answers for you as soon as authorities address the podium.
Adam Murphy with us live here in Winder. in Barrow County. Thank you so much, Adam, and we'll come back to you as that news conference gets started. But where we are outside the high school, it is still very much an active scene. You see the police tape about 30 yards from where we're standing, a number of law enforcement agencies. All the students' vehicles are still in these parking lots as investigators now look and comb the scene.
We also have a lot of choppers above, including our own. Let's take the vantage point of the First Alert chopper that is honing in on some images in the parking lot. I want to preface this. We don't know what type of white vans these are. Typically when we see a crime scene and we see white vans, it sometimes is the medical examiner's office. We are trying to determine what those vans are. Why are they here? Is it just law enforcement collecting evidence? This is a massive crime scene with a lot of evidence that has to be collected. And it's just gut-wrenching because there's so many unknowns, and you know your mind can take you to places that you don't need it to go right now. We are out here, we're asking questions, waiting for this press conference to give you brand new information.
And it could stay a crime scene for a while. I remember being in Uvalde, Texas. It was closed off to the public a very long time. So investigators could go in there and go from classroom to classroom. We don't know the layout. We don't know what kind of crime scene we're looking at. This is a big school. About 1,900 kids go here. So this is a big school. Even though we're in one of our smaller counties, it is still a big school with a lot of kids who are going here.
And we're asking questions also from school administrators in the district because of the fact that this is a crime scene and we don't know when students will be allowed to return to campus. Where will they go to school? I mean, unfortunately, when incidents happen like this, the education has to continue. Where will they go? Will neighboring schools allow the students to come and attend school with them? Will they go to what we saw during COVID, at-home learning? Those questions we hope to get answered tonight before families try to determine what they're going to do. They have jobs, they have to go to work. What do we do with our kids tomorrow? Those answers we don't have yet, but we are certainly asking them.
Sean, the reality is that this community is suffering in a major way because there are a number of loved ones who will not be coming home tonight to their families. And you think back to the start of this day, it is a beautiful day here in the Atlanta area, a nice breeze. It couldn't be more picturesque and more of a beautiful day here in our city and in our community. And to know that it's been tarnished by what we know right now and the information that is still yet to come, that could break all of our hearts.
And what we do know so far, if you're just joining our coverage, is that 4 people have been shot dead at Appalachia High School. We are awaiting a press conference to find out exactly who those individuals are. We also know that 9 people are injured in local hospitals. I know Savannah Louie, you were at the breaking news desk. You just learned brand new information. What have you learned?
Well, we are now hearing from leaders across the country, including Vice President Kamala Harris. She spoke at a campaign event earlier today in New Hampshire, where she called for an end to the epidemic of gun violence. Take a listen.
But this is just a senseless tragedy on top of so many senseless tragedies. And it's just outrageous that every day in our country, in the United States of America, that parents have to send their children to school worried about whether or not their child will come home alive. It's senseless. It is. We've got to stop it. And we have to end this epidemic of gun violence in our country once and for all.
And Harris ended by saying, quote, "It doesn't have to be this way, guys."
Savannah, thanks so much. And the word senseless comes to mind for so many people when they talk about this. And this community, we were talking earlier how it will be some time till this community can get past this. Right now, they're still very much trying to digest it. As you and I both arrived here, you couldn't help but see parents and students
and they're still walking.
Yeah, walk right off camera there. And you see them, and I can't imagine what's going through their minds. And I know we both have kids, and when you think about something like this, we all worry about getting that call.
Well, we spoke with an eyewitness earlier today, a 10th grader, and I almost broke down. It's so hard when you hear these stories and you see that there are so many school districts that are trying to make children focus on their classroom studies, and they're taking away their cell phones. But what we heard today was the cell phone was a lifeline for a 10th grader who texted her mother and said, "I don't know if I'm going to make it out here alive. I am scared, but I want you to know that I love you. She made it out okay. But there are other students, there's other people that we don't know if they did. We do know that 4 people have died. The community has rallied around the community of Appalachian High School, and also this is impacting not just the high school, but the middle school, the elementary school, and Winder Methodist Church is going to hold a prayer vigil and just a gathering for families to come together, vet this out. Express your emotions, because this is a senseless tragedy.
Sure, and you have to think, how do parents here in this community talk to their kids about what's happened here at the neighboring middle school, even the preschool across the street? But how do parents talk to their kids across this country about what has happened, and then send, so many schools just getting started here in Atlanta. We've been in school for about 3 or 4 weeks now, but how do you have that conversation with their kids and send them off to school tomorrow and say, have a great day, we know you're going to be okay?
The first thing I did when I even heard that this had happened, I texted my husband, because we can't text our daughter because she's at a school that doesn't allow them to have cell phones. But immediately I said, somehow, some way, check, make sure everything is okay. And our school wasn't even impacted by this. But this has a trickle-down effect, because the question that every parent is going to be asking tonight is my child safe in school?
Sure. I didn't even know. Walking out the door, my 3 boys were there, and they said, why are you leaving work early today? I said, there's been an incident at the school. And how do you explain that to young kids who will pick up this information? They will hear about it from their friends, and how do you have that conversation? It is a national conversation. The conversation today here, unfortunately, in Barrow County, as a wait for answers. We're expecting law enforcement to come to the microphones here. Maybe in 5 minutes, the update we were getting is at 4:30, but the latest information we are getting is that, and this was as of a couple of hours ago, 4 people killed, 9 others ending up in the hospital. The suspect is in custody. The suspect is alive. There were some inaccurate reports earlier. The suspect may not have been alive, but the latest information we are getting is that the suspect is in custody. As to who that is, we hope to get that here in this 4:30 news conference.
And hopefully we can take the vantage point from the First Alert chopper above the scene here at Appalachian High School. There are multiple big, huge white vans that are in the parking lot of Appalachian High School. We have not been able to determine what those vans are doing, but we are making the assumption that they are collecting evidence. There are long lines still. This is now 4:26 in the afternoon. School had been let out almost an hour ago. The lockdown was lifted, and there are still mounds and mounds of cars lined up. There are still parents that are pulling up to the elementary school, the middle school, the high school to reunite with their student.
And parents were having a tough time getting this close. The closer you got to the school, as you can imagine, the roads were closed off. Law enforcement were closing off those roads. And so what you had is parents, community members, parking on the sides of roads, making it the roads so tight and narrow to get through because they were ditching their cars and getting out, coming to the school, walking in, no matter how long it took. They just wanted to make sure the kids were okay and that they're safe.
And again, I just want to reiterate that if you are in Barrow County, if you are in the Winder community, Winder Methodist Church is holding a prayer vigil.
Yeah, they've opened up their church all day long and into the evening, knowing this community is hurting. And the Winder United Methodist Church will be there for people who want to come there and pray tonight and just be together.
We are awaiting a press conference that is scheduled to start in less than 3 minutes. Our Adam Murphy is in the position where the press conference will be held by law enforcement. We are expecting to hear details more about the 4 victims who lost their lives today. We're also expecting to hear about the 9 who are injured.
If you saw the news conference earlier around 2 or 2:30, they were giving basic information. I think at that point they were still trying to gather the information and also trying to notify families of those who may have lost ones. They want the families to hear it first rather than explaining to the media.
Well, let's go. We have a reporter on location. I believe that this is Chelsea Beinfor. Chelsea, tell us where you are and what have you learned so far?
Well, we're still on Tom Miller Road. This is about a mile from the school. This is where we've been positioned today. And this is where a lot of parents were being asked to park their cars and then walk about a mile to the high school back here behind us. So traffic is moving freely on this road once again. So it has been reopened up to cars. But I want to take you to some video of those parents that we talked to as they were literally running, walking as fast as they could this mile to the high school. We spoke with parents parents and grandparents. Some knew that their children were okay. They had been texting with them. They were saying, we're out on the football field, please come pick us up. But we also spoke to parents who had not been able to get in touch with their son or their daughter. A high school student, Melanie Alvarez, says she texted her mom as soon as the lockdown started and said, I love you. I hope I see you again. Her mom tells us that she raced to the school and was eventually reunited with Melanie out on the football field. We spoke with both of them as they were leaving the high school today.
I was scared. I was like, oh my God, like, are we seriously going through a lockdown? I started crying. I was like, I just want to get out of here. I just want to see my parents. Like, I don't want to be here no more. I just broke down crying completely.
And all of a sudden I hear her voice up from the bleachers, and I just started crying and, you know, thanking God in my head. Thank you, God, for allowing me to see my daughter again.
A lot of parents thankful to be reunited with their children. We know, unfortunately, that will not be the case for some families of those victims, but also those survivors. They witnessed horrible trauma today. So now families, they're talking about, you know, how this is going to impact their children for the rest of their lives. Guys, back to you.
Chelsea, thank you. You're mentioning that you spoke to eyewitness. We spoke to some here as well. A 10th grader who was in the classroom directly where the shooting happened. She reported hearing, she said, a series of gunshots. It was not just one or two. Yeah, that's how she described it. It was multiple gunshots and several successions of rounds of fire. When she came out of the classroom, when everything had settled, she said that she saw a lot of injuries. We know that the press conference, Blair, it is about to start here shortly. Law enforcement is now starting to approach the podium. There are going to be a lot of questions, particularly the one of a lot of concern for us in our newsroom is, was there a phone call made to Appalachia High School before school started, warning district administrators and the school personnel that there would be a school shooting at 5 different schools and that Appalachia would be the first?
Law enforcement gave an update a little earlier. We're expecting a lot more details on what they know, the latest information, but what we were hearing is that 4 people shot and killed here at Appalachia High School. And we look over our shoulder, you can see this large law enforcement presence that is on its way. It is a slow walk, a very deliberate walk from Appalachia High School, where there has been this tragedy, to these cameras, where they will be offering some new insight into what they've learned here. And you can only imagine what's the tales from inside that store.
I am just watching the body language, Blair. Just the body language alone is giving me a sense that the tone is going to, number one, be somber. We do know that there were 4 people killed. The question is, will they have the next of kin been notified, and will they share that information? But it's a very deliberate walk. The faces are somber. They're actually looking down at the ground while they're walking. I anticipate that this press conference, it may be gut-wrenching. Law enforcement, they've seen what they've seen inside of the school. We don't know what type of weapon was used, at what point, how close was the student when they shot the victims? Was it at point range? This crime scene is massive, and what they have seen is probably unthinkable. But as they approach the podium, we're preparing to hear their statement.
We know local law enforcement is here. We know the FBI is here. GBI is here as this news conference is about to get underway. And as they start to take the podium and give us an update, let's go ahead and take it live now as this is about to begin.
Director of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And we wanted to come back this afternoon and present you with a little more of a timeline of the events that have taken place here today and what we know up to this point with the investigation. At approximately 10:20 a.m. this morning, the Barrow County Sheriff's Office received alerts about reports of an active shooter and radio traffic from school resource officers concerning the same concern, or having the same concern. Within minutes, law enforcement was on scene, as well as 2 school resource officers assigned here to the school, who immediately encountered the subject within just minutes of this report going out. Once they encountered the subject immediately surrendered to these officers, and he was taken into custody. Additionally, what I want you to know as of now, there are 4 individuals who are deceased from this incident, 9 that have been taken to local hospitals with various injuries. Of those that are deceased, 2 were students and 2 were teachers here at the school. The priority right now for us within this investigation is to gather all the facts, to make sure that we're accurate with it, because this is a murder investigation. As the sheriff mentioned earlier this morning, the shooter is in custody. His name is Colt, that's C-O-L-T, Gray. He is a 14-year-old student here at the school, G-R-A-Y. He is a 14-year-old student here at the high school. Again, he has been taken into custody. He will be charged with murder, and he will be tried as an adult and handled as an adult. We're coordinating these charges and obviously this investigation with District Attorney Brad Smith, who is the District Attorney for the Piedmont Judicial Circuit here. Since early this morning we talked with you, and since the incident occurred, numerous interviews have been taking place through our investigation with students, faculty, as well as any other witnesses that we could identify. Law enforcement had a very, very swift response to this incident once the incident was determined that there was a concern here. Those resources, whether it was in that response or throughout this investigation to assist, came obviously from the sheriff's office here, from other local law enforcement agencies, state law enforcement agencies, and federal law enforcement agencies as well. To include, not to be left out, multiple EMS personnel, multiple fire personnel, and agencies. Those agencies responded here as well today, and I am extremely grateful, as I know the sheriff is, for that quick response and the partnerships of working here together with what all is going on. Currently, from the investigative perspective, we have crime scene agents and other special agents from the GBI, from close to a dozen of our different work units from across the state that have responded here today to work on this investigation, again, collecting evidence, conducting interviews, and so forth. I do want to pass this along, that if anyone has any information that wants to be passed on concerning this investigation, that they can do that anonymously at our tip line at 1-800-597-TIPS or 1-800-597-8477. They can also report this on by downloading the See Something, Send Something app. They can be done by Android or Apple phones, either one. If they need to report any tips concerning this investigation. Let me close out before I turn this over to the sheriff and let you just remind you that this is still a very active investigation. There is still a lot that is very fluid. There's still a lot of interviews to be conducted that will continue on into the night, as well as crime scene work and collecting and gathering evidence. But what is more important for me to mention here to you is my heartfelt sympathy to the parents, the students that were here today. Regardless of where they were in the school, this has got a great impact on them as well as on this community. My thoughts and prayers, along with everybody standing behind me and every law enforcement agency in this state, and many I will tell you around this country, they are in our thoughts and prayers, and we will continue with that. We ask for your patience as we continue through this, and we'll continue to try to give you as many updates with information as we can to keep you informed. But thank you for being here. I'm now going to turn it over to Barrow County Sheriff Judd Smith. Thank you.
Director, would you spell your name, please?
H-O-S-E-Y.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Sheriff Judd Smith of the Barrow County Sheriff's Office. I never imagined that I would be speaking to the media in my career over something that happened today, the pure evil that happened today. I cannot thank the people behind me for the support they give me today, to give this office and give this staff. This hits home for me. I was born and raised here. I went to school in this school system. My kids go to this school system. I'm proud of this school system. My heart hurts for these kids. My heart hurts for our community. But I want to make it very clear that hate will not prevail in this county. I want that to be very clear and known. Love will prevail over what happened today. I assure you of that. It is very early as to what happened. Governor Kemp reached out to me and has provided me every single resource that he has to make sure justice prevails. I don't know why it happened. I may not ever know. We may not ever know. But I ask that you and our community lift up our schools, lift up our public safety, and that, again, we do not let this hateful event prevail as to what happened today. I want to thank the surrounding agencies and counties and cities and state and federal authorities that have come and provided us, because they prevented a lot of more tragic events from happening. Continue to lift up these families, continue to lift up our students and our kids, and know that love will prevail. At this time, I'm going to ask Dr. LaDuff, our school superintendent, to come and speak on behalf of the school.
Good afternoon. I'm Dallas LaDuff. I'm the superintendent of Bexar County School System. I want to thank the Bexar County Sheriff's Office and all of our law enforcement partners for their swift response today, along with that of our staff. I'd also like to thank our community for their response and patience as we work to reunify the students with their families here today and secure the rest of our school campuses. Our schools will be closed for the remainder of this week as we cooperate fully with law enforcement to get answers to the many questions that we all have about this incident here today. But as we are closed, our central offices will remain open, where we will have grief counseling available for our community every day this week and thereafter as we support each other through this terrible event. In closing, I just want to say to our community, as a school system, we are here for you, we support you, and we are ready to get you any support that you may need as we grieve through this together. Thank you.
Sheriff, if you're saying hate will not prevail in this community, are you investigating this as some sort of hate crime?
Well, shortly, if someone decides to take a firearm into a school where kids are given an education or entitled to an education and want to harm others, to me it's hateful.
Sheriff, can you talk about the initial interaction between whoever was able to stop the shooter? Can you describe that to us? How did it go down? What exactly happened for us?
Obviously, the shooter was armed, and our school resource officer engaged him. And the shooter quickly realized that if he did not give up, that it would end with an OIS, or an officer-involved shooting. He gave up, got on the ground, and the deputy took him into custody.
Sheriff, any idea how the weapon got inside the school? And was there any warning that this was going to happen?
Not that I'm aware of. Again, very early, and we're still looking into that, whether or not, or how he obtained it and how he got it into school.
Have you been in touch at all with his parents or his family to learn more about what led up to these moments?
We have.
Any information you can share?
No.
What kind of weapon was
It seems like you have a large Hispanic population. Have you been able to communicate with the people in their language to make sure that everybody knows what's happening?
Yes, sir, I have. The school and our office has people that speak in Spanish, and they have spoke to those folks as well. Yes.
How is
Sheriff, is the shooter speaking with law enforcement now?
Sorry.
Is the shooter talking, and is he saying why?
The shooter was interviewed, and he was speaking with our investigators earlier, along with the GBI.
How is that video surveillance? How is that helping you, Sheriff?
It is helping our investigation.
Sheriff, is
reports of threatening calls perhaps made to the school prior to the shooting? Is that accurate?
None that I'm aware of.
Were all 9 injured victims shot?
In some capacity, yes.
Sheriff, can you tell us about the 2 individuals deceased and was one targeted?
We don't know of any targets at this point.
Sheriff, what kind of weapon was used? Have you identified the weapon?
We have not identified that at this point. No.
Sheriff, is there a connection?
This is the last question I'm going to take.
Sheriff, is there a connection between the shooter and the victims?
None that I'm aware of.
Was this a student here at the school?
I know that you have a lot of questions about the student and that we mentioned that we identified earlier. Keep in mind that that's part of our investigation, that we're looking into every aspect of that individual, his connection here at the school. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, he was a student here. So as part of our investigation, we're looking into all aspects, current and prior, involving that individual.
Can you tell us how many rounds were fired? Can you tell us how many rounds were fired?
Do what?
The shooter is a student, yes.
When can we expect the
We do not know how many rounds.
Director, has that shooter had any past history with law enforcement?
For now, this is the information that we have. It is an active investigation. I assure you we do plan to come back out here in a couple of hours. Please make sure you're following the GBIX page. That's where we're going to be putting the updates. If there's anything that's new, we'll make sure that we share that information. It's still very early. Investigators have a lot of work to do. We appreciate your patience. Do expect another in-person news conference out here in the next few hours. Monitor the X page, and we will be sure to update you accordingly. Thank you.
And that's the on x.com?
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.